The day I'm recording this is July 2nd, 2025. 3 months since the reveal of Kirby Air Riders. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm getting really antsy to see some footage. I've been doing this thing where I'll search Kirby Air Riders on Google and then look at the past 24-hour results pretty much every day, just to see what anyone and everyone is saying about Kirby Air Riders. I'm desperate for some discourse around this game. Now granted, this isn't new. I used to do this a long time ago, just to see if there were any new rumors about a new Kirby Air Ride game, because I wanted to be on top of things. I wanted to know as soon as there was anything to know about a possible Kirby Air Ride sequel. But now that it's real, I'm really interested in seeing what people have to say. But there's not a lot of people saying a lot right now. Currently, most of the discussion is revolving around this rumor that Sakurai essentially made a bit of a barter with Nintendo, where they would let him make Kirby Air Riders in order to then follow that up with another Smash Bros. Game. And so a lot of the discussion about Kirby Air Riders as of late is more so focused on Smash Bros. And how Kirby Air Riders might affect the next Smash Bros. But I'm here to talk about Kirby Air Riders. So with that in mind, now seems like a good time to do a video talking about my hopes, my fears, and my predictions for this new game before they reveal any more information. I've been thinking a lot about what I want this game to look like, and so I think it will be neat to talk about that now, and then later compare it to how it actually turns out. So I'm just gonna ramble a bit about all that, starting with the very obvious hope I have for this game, and that is the return of City Trial. I want to see City Trial come back, and I want to see it expanded and refined. It doesn't need to be changed in any major way. I just want to see some of the flaws of the original mode ironed out, and then a whole lot of extra content added on top. For those who might not be familiar with the original Kirby Air Ride, City Trial was a mode in the game that, instead of focusing on just racing, was much more varied in how it played. There are 2 phases to City Trial. The first one has you and the other players roaming around a fairly large map collecting stat boosts, things such as a top speed boost or an offense boost or a turn boost, while also looking for a vehicle that you like. And during that time, you're able to interact with other players, so you're all competing for the same resources. You can attack other players to steal resources from them, or to try to destroy whatever vehicle they found. And then after a time limit is up, everyone competes in a randomly selected stadium. And the stadium can be a single lap of a racetrack, it can be a drag race, it could be a Kirby Melee, where you're trying to defeat as many enemies as possible. It could be a destruction derby, where you are trying to destroy the other players as much as possible. There's target flight, where you essentially use your vehicle as a dart and try to score points on a giant dartboard. It's all about trying to create a really good build during the first phase, and then really execute and pull ahead of your opponents in the second phase, which is where the winner is truly determined. The thing that makes it so fun, though, is that there is a lot of randomized elements, so every time you play is different than the last. No 2 matches of City Trial will ever be alike. However, it does have a few problems, which I am hoping to see fixed in Kirby Air Riders. One of the problems with City Trial is just how little content it has. There is 1 map in the original game. There's a decent amount of stadiums, and there are also random events which can occur during the first phase. But what's crazy is, despite it only having 1 map, it is still a ton of fun, and it is still a game that me and some of my friends revisit frequently. So imagining a City Trial with multiple maps, and even more stadiums, and even more random events, more variables to keep things even more fresh, is super exciting. If the original City Trial lasted me over 20 years, I would imagine an expanded City Trial could easily last me the rest of my life. I want to be 60 years old and still be playing this game. I want to be playing this game when I am 80 in the old person's home with my fellow old people. And if they add plenty of new content to the new City Trial, then that could happen. The other issue with the original City Trial, though, comes down to just certain design flaws. None of these completely ruin the mode, obviously, although there have been some hacks that I have recently dabbled in that fix some of these issues, which has been really nice, but it would be great to have an official solution that would be more polished than some of these hacks that I've used to clean the original game up a little bit. One of the biggest issues with City Trial in the original game is that if another player destroys your star, you do not respawn with another star. You end up stuck on foot, and when you're on foot, you have to just run around as Kirby, which is very slow. You can't pick up stats. All you can do in that state is try to run to another star somewhere on the map. The problem is, when you are in that state and all your opponents are, a bajillion times faster than you are, they can just go around the map and destroy every other star that has spawned before you reach it, which ends up putting you in the situation where you basically can't do anything for the rest of the time remaining in the round, which is a big problem. Similarly, when you get destroyed, not only do you lose your vehicle, but you also lose pretty much all of the stat boosts you've collected. When players hit each other, they will drop a few stat boosts that then other players can pick up. But when your star is destroyed, you pretty much lose all of them. You'll lose all but 2 of each stat. So between that and losing your star, you end up falling really far behind, and at that point, there's practically no way you'll catch up. So it'd be nice if, again, getting your star destroyed would not punish you quite as bad. There's a lot of room for the new City Trial to improve the balance quite a bit and make sure the game remains fun, even in scenarios where you've fallen behind. There are other little issues, but those are the 2 biggest ones that come to my mind. So I'm really hoping with this new Kirby Air Riders that they fix those issues, that they really polish it up. Again, I don't want to see any major changes to City Trial. I just want to see that original concept refined and expanded upon, because City Trial really is special, and it doesn't need to be changed in any major way to make a splash, to be fun even today. Quite frankly, I think City Trial was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. It has a lot in common with modern roguelike design in the way that each round is about coming up with a build by collecting stats and just gathering resources in a somewhat randomized scenario. Many people have compared City Trial to Battle Royales, which there are definitely some similarities there, but that will bring me to my next point, which is a little bit of a fear that I've had regarding this new Kirby Air Ride game, which is the possibility that City Trial will be turned into more of a Battle Royale than what City Trial was. I have seen a number of people make this comparison and then go on to say that, wow, wouldn't it be great if City Trial just was turned into a full-blown Battle Royale? Some people have referred to City Trial as a prototype Battle Royale, so I suppose in their mind it's kind of like, yeah, that was kind of like a prototype of Battle Royale, so why not go all in on what that genre has become? But I have a few big problems with that idea. Not that I think that's likely going to happen, but I do want to talk about that a bit, because there's a lot of people who seem to want it to go that direction, and I've got a few problems with that. First, the first problem is City Trial, though it has some surface level similarities to Battle Royales, they are just surface level. I can see why somebody who has played Battle Royales and knows Battle Royales, who is then looking at City Trial, would see those similarities and then just assume that it should be more like Battle Royales because that's what they're familiar with. However, as somebody who has the perspective of a player who first played City Trial, and then later has played Battle Royales, I can safely say that Battle Royales do not scratch the same itch that City Trial does. If City Trial really was just a prototype Battle Royale type game, then I would be satisfied with Fortnite. I wouldn't have been waiting all this time for a Kirby Air Riders sequel. I would have just started playing Fortnite, and I would have been, wow, this is what City Trial always could have been, and now it's finally here, and this is what I've always wanted, but that's not the case. City Trial has a lot that makes it very unique even today, and with this sequel, I want to see Sakurai innovate within the industry instead of conform to trends by just turning it into a battle royale. The surface level similarities pretty much come down to the fact that both games involve a bunch of players freely roaming around a fairly large map, collecting resources, being able to freely engage in battles, and then eventually culminating in some sort of final battle. But despite that somewhat similar structure, one of the big differences, for example, is the fact that battle royales are elimination-based. Once you die, you're out of the game, and the winner is the last person standing. Whereas City Trial is time limit based. You do not get knocked out of the game if, say, another player destroys your star. You can get back up and you can go find another one and hopefully recover. Another big difference is the final culminating battle. In Fortnite, it's just all the last players eventually get pushed together into a small spot, and they all, it becomes a free-for-all. But in City Trial, the final battle can be several different things because of the stadium system. And that variety is one of the big draws of City Trial, for me anyways. In Fortnite, you pretty much know how the end of the round is going to go every time, but in City Trial, it could be a lot of different things, which test a lot of different aspects of your skill set and your build. Of course, City Trial is also more stat-based, whereas Battle Royales tend to be more resource-based, or I guess a lot of Battle Royales really don't even have resource systems. Something like Fall Guys is all about physics-based platforming. But while all of those differences are in regards to the game design, there is another aspect, another difference that would majorly affect the fun of City Trial, and that is the player count. City Trial had a max of 4 players, whereas Battle Royales are all about having a whole lot more players, often up to 100 or so. And while that can be fun in its own way, it completely eliminates the possibility of local multiplayer. One of my dreams for the Switch, since the original Switch, not just the Switch 2. Fun fact, my original Nintendo Switch, I named it, because you can name your console in the settings, I named it something along the lines of City Trial Machine, because, I was being stupid, and I was like, oh yeah, they'll definitely make Kirby Air Ride for this system. And the dream has always been being able to put the Switch down on the kickstand, hand a friend a Joy-Con, and play City Trial anytime, anywhere. And that's gonna be possible if City Trial is designed for, 4 or so players. But if City Trial gets changed to a mode that's focused on having, let's say, 64 players, or even something like 16 or 32, that's really going to hurt local multiplayer, if not make it so local multiplayer isn't even an option. I really don't want City Trial to end up being an online exclusive mode due to it being designed to be more like a battle royale than what the original game was. Worst case scenario, assuming that they do take City Trial in this direction, is that there is no local multiplayer. You get online or nothing. If you want to do 4-player split screen, you're limited to the racing mode. A better case scenario, again, if they were to do this large player count route, would be they still let you do 4-player split screen in City Trial, but in this case, all of the content, the maps and the stadiums, would all be designed around a large player count, which would end up meaning things would be too large to be a whole lot of fun with just 4 players. Let alone 2, because the original City Trial is a lot of fun even if it's just a 1v1. I think a really good example of how accounting for a really large player count can hurt local multiplayer is Mario Kart's battle modes. I think Double Dash was the last truly great Mario Kart battle mode, because ever since Wii, they've been designing their battle courses for 12 or more players, not counting Mario Kart 7. Because of this, you end up in really large maps where you're not as likely to see the other players you care about as often. Oftentimes, they have to include time limits to help these modes end within a reasonable amount of time, because otherwise they would drag on, because again, the maps are so big. A lot of times they end up making it team-based, which is just annoying if you just want to sit down with a group of friends and play split screen. Nobody wants CPUs to be involved while playing split screen, but if your map is so big, 4 players isn't enough to fill it, then yeah, throwing CPUs in tends to be one of the only decent solutions. So I don't want City Trial to end up in a similar scenario where it just ends up not being fun with 2 or 4 or 3 friends because the maps are so big, or because you're forced to play with a bunch of CPUs. Now, all that said, if there was City Trial, as it was in the original game, in addition to a Battle Royale style mode in Kirby Air Riders, then as long as each mode has its own content designed according to the rules and the player counts, I think that'd be pretty cool. I would personally like to see a scenario where it's just City Trial, and where City Trial gets the spotlight, and where a lot of people discover how fun that formula is. But I wouldn't complain if they had an expanded City Trial alongside City Royale or something like that. You know, they can coexist. I just don't want City Trial to end up being left behind. And speaking of being left behind, my other fear, obviously, is that Kirby Air Riders doesn't have City Trial at all. I don't think that's likely. I really don't think that's likely. Sakurai is a person who very clearly is aware of what people want, and so I'm sure he knows a lot of people want City Trial. And when you consider stuff like Smash Run essentially being City Trial for Smash Bros., it's pretty clear, I think, that City Trial will be making a return in Kirby Air Riders. But there's, that little part of me that's like, hasn't been confirmed. You never know. Maybe Sakurai really just wanted to double down on the racing, and City Trial just wasn't on his to-do list for this game. Now, that would be the ultimate monkey paw scenario right there, but I don't think there's any reason to worry about that. In regards to the racing, though, another thing I would really like to see in Kirby Air Riders is a greatly improved racing mode. Even though I think I will always prefer City Trial over any racing game when it comes to just my favorite multiplayer games, I would like it a lot if Kirby Air Riders was both a go-to party game and a go-to racing game. As it is, I don't ever go to Kirby Air Ride specifically for racing. If I want to play a racing game with somebody, I'm going to pick Mario Kart or Wave Race 64, or maybe even something like Need for Speed over Kirby Air Ride any day. But if I'm not specifically in a racing mood, then Kirby Air Ride is usually going to be at the top of my list for multiplayer games I'd like to play. But it would be great if Kirby Air Riders could change that. The original Kirby Air Rides racing mode had a lot of problems. It was very unbalanced in terms of the different stars that were available, and that was countered by some pretty crazy rubber banding. There are issues where the items feel kind of useless. It's very odd. The original Kirby Air Ride was designed as a racing game first and foremost, but it really feels like it was designed around City Trial because of the way the different stars handle so differently and have so many different strengths and weaknesses. Some stars are designed with combat in mind, but combat doesn't really come into play in Air Ride, the main racing mode. But it does in City Trial. Some stars are designed to be very easy to maneuver in ways that aren't really intuitive in the tracks, but that's great for City Trial. So I would like to see some changes made, and I'm not even sure what that would look like, but I'd like to see changes made that make the racing really fun on its own. Maybe that could involve putting stat boosts in the races. That could be an interesting form of rubber banding where if you're falling behind, more patches spawn for you to pick up to help you gain an advantage. I'd like to see combat become more relevant in the racing mode. In the original Air Ride, combat exists by default but doesn't do much. You can hit another player and that gives you a small speed boost, or at least attacking other enemies on the map does, but it doesn't do a whole lot by default. There is a setting that you can turn on which will give everyone health bars, but what that does is it makes it so that if you destroy another player, they retire and they're out of the race permanently at that point, which I think that could also be improved. Maybe destroying other players could be made easier, but it doesn't knock them out of the race. It just, causes them to have to stop for a moment. And I don't know. There's, I think, a lot of potential, especially considering that Sakurai has had 20 years to mull over the design of the original game. So I'd imagine he has some good ideas on how to improve the core racing of Kirby Air Ride in Kirby Air Riders. And I guess while I'm talking about racing, I'll also mention Top Ride. Again, for those who might not be familiar, the original Kirby Air Ride had another mode called Top Ride, which was a very simple top-down mode, very short tracks. You would do like 8 laps. It was just a very goofy party racing game, and it was fun. It was good fun. But the question is, will it return in Kirby Air Riders? Personally, I don't care. If it's there, that would be cool. I had fun with it in the original game. I'm sure I'd have fun with a new version. But if it's not there, I'm not going to be upset in the slightest. I can't really even think of how it could be improved. It just kind of is what it is. And again, it's fun. It was always kind of nice to cool down after, a long play session with a few rounds of Top Ride. But other than it having online play added and maybe more tracks than in the original game, I don't think there's much you can do with it. Now that said, if I had to predict whether or not it will return, I think I'd lean towards it not returning. But with Sakurai, it's kind of hard to say. My thought is that since it is such a different style from the other 2 modes, being top-down, I would think that a sequel with a clearer direction, they might choose to focus on what's really important, which would be Air Ride and City Trial, and not invest resources into what feels like a goofy little extra minigame. But Sakurai loves his goofy extra little minigames, so I could totally see him opting to keep it in the sequel. But if I had to make a prediction, I'm going to say that I do not think it will return. Going back to Air Ride, I've talked about how I would like to see the core mechanics improved to just make the racing on its own more fun. But of course, I would also like to see the mode expanded with more content, similar to what I was saying with City Trial. Kirby Air Ride did not have very many tracks, and it didn't have any sort of single-player content outside of the checklist. And I'm not personally too concerned about single-player content. To me, a game like Kirby Air Ride is all about the multiplayer. I really don't need any sort of single-player campaign. That would be a cool addition, though, for other players. But for me, the thing that I would most want to see is just a greater total of tracks. It doesn't need to be a ton, but the original game really was short on tracks, so I'm thinking at least 24 tracks would be nice. Doesn't need to be as much as Mario Kart, but I feel like 24 is a reasonable number. I'm just spitballing here. But between a racing mode with 24 tracks and a City Trial mode with multiple maps, that would be plenty of content. And of course, it would all be made even better with online play. I absolutely want to see online play, and that's obviously a given at this point. I mean, heck, Kirby Air Ride had LAN play, and that was a GameCube game. So Sakurai has clearly been thinking about Kirby Air Ride being played online in some capacity since the beginning. So yeah, obviously we're going to get online for Kirby Air Riders, but what I'd really like to see is something to incentivize playing online. Something more than, say, Mario Kart's point system, where you go online and you play and you get points as you win or lose points as you lose. It'd be nice for there to be something a little bit more in-depth. It doesn't need to be a games as a service model. It doesn't need to be a battle pass or anything like that. Just, I'd like to have a bit more reason to play besides just wanting to play. Which obviously, just having a free play mode that I can play when I want to play is fine, but I think it'd be really cool to have some sort of goal to work towards when I'm playing online. But I don't have anything specific in mind. I'm kind of hoping here that Sakurai has a surprise up his sleeve. You know, do something a little different, something we haven't seen before with online games. Smash Bros. Ultimate has the 4 Fun and 4 Glory modes, which are good options. And then, of course, it has the Global Smash Power, I believe it's called, where instead of ranking down, you have a number that gets bigger the better you do, and it's kind of this reverse leaderboard system. That's a bit odd, but then of course it also has, I believe it's called Elite Smash, where if you get a specific character up to a certain global smash power, then you get Elite Smash, which is like exclusively you're going to get matched up with the best of the best. If something like that for Kirby Air Riders could be cool. I could see there being, say, Elite Racing for individual vehicles, but really I'd just like there to be something that surprises me. Another big multiplayer feature I'd like to see in this game is a lot more options. Sakurai tends to be very good at giving players options to customize games to their liking, and so I'm hoping to see that same level of control that Smash Bros. Gives brought over to Kirby Air Riders. The original Kirby Air Ride had a few options, but I'd like to see a lot more in Kirby Air Riders, and I'd like to see these options be available online, at the very least when creating rooms to play with friends. When it comes to multiplayer games, I think giving players the options to change a lot of things to their liking is always good, because inevitably when you're playing with a specific group of friends, a lot of people are gonna have a lot of preferences and a lot of play styles that might kind of clash with the defaults. So giving players that level of control can really allow groups to refine things to a way in which they all enjoy. You know, you see how that benefits a game like Smash Bros. And you can imagine how that would benefit a game like, you know, Mario Party, the recent Mario Parties, which barely have any options. And so sometimes you get locked into a specific rule set, and then you and all your friends are playing, and you keep saying, I wish we could change this and this and this. And that would make a much better experience. So I'm hoping to see that level of customizability in Kirby Air Riders. I think that's pretty likely. Again, Sakurai likes to give players options in his multiplayer games, so I'm really excited to see how much control Sakurai gives players when it comes to fine-tuning the experience to their liking. Let's see, that's most of my major concerns. I got a few other miscellaneous thoughts. One would be that just that the game performs well. This is a Nintendo Switch 2 game being developed by Sakurai, so I have no doubts that the performance will be fantastic and that the game will also look fantastic. I'm imagining 120 FPS 1080p 4-player split screen when playing on the handheld, or 4K 60 FPS 4-player split screen when playing on TV. At the very least, I think it's guaranteed that we'll get 60 1080p when playing the Switch 2 in handheld or on the stand. I don't really have any desires as to how the game looks, just as long as it is crisp and responsive. Also, really hoping that the online performance is good. I know a lot of people who are really big into Smash complain about Smash Bros. Online being very frustrating to play, but I'm hoping that Kirby Air Riders being a racing game, that there will be greater efforts put into ensuring that it is really responsive. Because, you know, it's a racing game. You're constantly moving forward, so it has to be responsive. You can get away with a little bit of input lag in a game like Super Smash Bros., where it is often, you know, okay to stop moving, but in a racing game, not like it has to be responsive. So, you know, there better not be any input lag. If there is visual lag in terms of updating the positions of other players around you, that could be fine, although that could be bad for combat. But as long as me inputting an action has it respond as quickly online as it does in single player, then that'll be fine. If there's input lag, that'll really hurt the experience of online play. And I quite frankly think that this game's success is banking on it having really good online play. I'll also touch on the character roster because that's a pretty hot topic. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about whether or not this game will have a larger character roster than the original. And me personally, I am not concerned about the character roster all that much. The original game, for those who may not know, Kirby was basically the only playable character. It's all about the vehicles. The vehicles are all so distinct that they are the focus. And in the original, you could also unlock King Dedede and Meta Knight, but they were more so extras than actual viable playable characters, because whereas Kirby will ride on any of the game's different stars, Meta Knight and King Dedede were locked to their own vehicles, or in the case of Meta Knight didn't even ride a vehicle, he just flew around. So they always felt kind of like just extras thrown in there rather than an actual attempt of having multiple playable characters. And I'm imagining that the way this game will be designed will result in the same thing, where it'll be all about Kirby riding very distinct vehicles. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not that's the case. I have a lot more thoughts regarding the character roster in this game, but I'll save those for another video after we know more about the game and after we find out if there are going to be other playable characters or if it's just going to be Kirby. Okay, I thought I was done with the video, but I checked a list of topics to talk about that I made earlier, and I found one more that I haven't touched on, and that is the physics. One of the things that makes City Trial and Kirby Air Ride so great is how ridiculous it can get. Depending on the star you have and the amount of stats you have, things can get really, really wild. For example, with the wheelie scooter, if you have enough charge patches and boost patches, you can basically mash A to constantly drive at your full boost speed. Or if you have the bulk star, which is typically hated by most players, but if you take that and you get a whole lot of glide, then that thing will literally just start launching straight up into the air the moment you drive off of a ledge. There is a lot of moments in City Trial where things just feel like they're breaking, and that is where a lot of the fun comes from. My hope is that that wackiness of the physics is maintained in Kirby Air Riders, and that they don't overly polish the physics and end up sucking some of that chaos out of the game. I do think there is a tendency for bigger studios to do that, to see a little bit of jank and remove it and, iron it out, whether or not that jank was fun or not. I mean, you can look at Mario Kart, for example. Mario Kart Wii was the last Mario Kart game to have really crazy physics. Since then, they've really polished it, and it feels really good, but it also feels a little stale. You know what I mean? Mario Kart 8, specifically Deluxe, is probably the best Mario Kart overall. But when it comes to the feel, I think I generally have more fun with games like Double Dash and Wii, just because of those more unique, more wacky physics. And I kind of have a hard time imagining City Trial without those wacky physics. There have been a lot of times that I have just burst out laughing from the pure insanity of a good round of City Trial. And a lot of it comes down to just how weird the physics become when you have a lot of stats. So that's what I'm hoping for, but my prediction would probably be that it's probably gonna be polished up to be a little bit less insane than it was in the original game. But I think there will still be some of that chaos maintained, because the nature of stat boosts, I don't think there's really a possibility of them ironing out all that weirdness unless they go in and specifically program each vehicle to not behave a specific way with a certain amount of stat boosts. Like going back to that wheelie scooter example I gave, based on the way the game is programmed and designed, I don't think there's a scenario where they've somehow adjusted the physics to not allow you to be able to mash A to go at your constant boost speed, unless they specifically go in and check for that condition, and if you have the stats that allow that, to then change something about your vehicle behind the scenes to prevent that. They kind of need to do that for every weird edge case that becomes possible with the stat boost, and I don't think Sakurai would have his team do that. I don't think that's the sort of thing. I think he would understand the fun of being able to break these vehicles by having specific combinations of stats. So it will ultimately, I'm guessing that the game will feel a bit more polished than the original, while still maintaining a lot of that very wacky nature. I'm just hoping it's not overly polished. Well, I think that wraps up this rambly video. I'm glad I was able to record this before we got to see footage of Kirby Air Riders, which will hopefully not be too much longer. I am keeping my eyes and ears peeled for the announcement of a Nintendo Direct, or heck, maybe we'll get a Direct specifically for Kirby Air Riders with Sakurai showing us the game. Who knows at this point? I even downloaded the Nintendo Today app. I did not want to download the Nintendo Today app, but they started just dropping stuff on there before anywhere else. So I'm trying to stay on top of things. So I guess I got to have that, because they might just reveal Kirby Air Riders first footage on the app before anywhere else. So I got to be ready for that. But yeah, whenever that happens, whenever we get a trailer or a gameplay overview, I'll probably record a reaction and then do an analysis video or something. If they take too long to do that, I might upload another rambly, podcasty video in the meantime. But I'm thinking that gameplay reveal is just around the corner. Worst case scenario, it'll be shortly after Donkey Kong Bonanza releases, but I'm hoping for something as soon as next week. Gosh, I feel like the next Nintendo Direct, every day I'm just waiting for them to announce it. It's been 3 months. 3 months since they announced the game, and we still don't have any gameplay footage. The longer we go, the crazier it's gonna make me, so I think doing these videos is gonna help keep me sane for a little bit longer. Anyways, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed me rambling about the possibilities of Kirby Air Riders, feel free to leave a like or to comment with your own hopes, fears, and predictions for how this game will turn out. I'm really curious to see what people are thinking and expecting, so I would really enjoy to read y'all's comments. While I'm here, I'll also mention that I made a video game called Baldi's Basics, and my game Baldi's Basics Plus, which is a hugely expanded take on the original Baldi's Basics, is currently available in early access, and it is on sale as part of the Steam Summer Sale. It's 40% off, so that's a pretty good deal, I'd say. But that is everything I have to say for this video, so until next time, bye.